Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal when Anna Devane entered the WSB office to confront Jack Brennan, she had no idea that she was stepping directly into a deadly trap that Brennan had meticulously laid out for her. Brennan, a man with a shadowy past and a path littered with dark schemes, had been waiting for this moment for years. Before the confrontation, Anna had threatened Brennan boldly, warning him that if he didn't stop immediately, she would expose all the secrets he and WSB were desperately trying to keep hidden, including the truth about Jocelyn, the young woman Brennan had dragged into the dangerous world of the organization. This revelation could destroy everything, especially when Carly Spencer, Jocelyn's mother, found out that her daughter had been manipulated and used all along. Yet, Brennan wasn't intimidated. He knew Anna was a far greater threat than he had ever anticipated. If he allowed her to live, all of his carefully laid plans would come undone. He couldn't let that happen. As Anna began noticing strange signs and anomalies, she quickly pieced together some unsettling clues. To her horror, she discovered that Jocelyn was, in fact, working for WSB, a fact that had been hidden from her until now. But the revelations didn't stop there. Anna also uncovered that Brennan had a complicated past with Valentine Cassadine and Robert Scorpio, her former colleagues from the Spy Training Academy. She knew about the dark secrets he kept hidden and the places where the bodies of his victims were buried, metaphorically and literally. This knowledge terrified Brennan, for Anna was the only person who could expose everything. He realized she was a danger to him like no one else. When Anna faced Brennan directly, she made a decisive move, threatening him that if Carly found out the truth about Jocelyn, everything would spiral out of control. But Brennan, acting swiftly and with cold determination, decided to take matters into his own hands. The moment Anna left their confrontation, Brennan ordered his men to implement a plan to kidnap her. It wasn't just about silencing her anymore, he needed to erase her completely. Brennan knew that if Anna survived and walked away with the knowledge she had gained, everything he had worked for, including his reputation, power, and position in WSB, would be lost. No one, not even Carly, who shared a close bond with Anna, knew of the imminent danger Anna was in. It wasn't until Emma, Anna's sharp-minded granddaughter, sensed something was wrong that the truth started to surface. Emma, with her intuitive nature and growing concern for her grandmother, felt a change in the air. Something wasn't right. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma embarked on her own investigation. With the help of her close friend Gio, Emma soon realized that Anna was being controlled by Brennan, trapped in a dangerous web of deceit and manipulation. The two quickly devised a plan to rescue Anna, but they had no idea just how cruel and ruthless Brennan could be in his pursuit of power. As the days passed, Emma and Gio dug deeper, uncovering more about Brennan's involvement with WSB and his dark history. They soon realized they were running out of time. Brennan wasn't just a dangerous man, he was a man desperate to cover his tracks. Knowing that Anna was an immediate threat to his empire, Brennan intensified his efforts. He wasn't going to let a loose end like Anna ruin everything he had built. When Emma and Gio finally located Anna's last known whereabouts, they were confronted with a harrowing reality. They arrived just in time to see Anna being dragged into a black van, her screams muffled as Brennan's men subdued her. Emma's heart raced as she witnessed the brutal scene unfold before her eyes. She knew she had to act quickly, but she wasn't prepared for what happened next. As she and Gio tried to intervene, Emma was struck by one of Brennan's men, the impact knocking her to the ground. But she refused to give up, and in that moment, Anna's survival became her only focus. Despite her injuries, Emma and Gio managed to get Anna out of the van and to safety, but the danger was far from over. Emma, however, had been badly hurt in the process. Her injuries were severe, and it was clear that without immediate medical attention, she wouldn't make it. Anna, determined not to lose another family member, rushed her granddaughter to safety, but the trauma of the events would stay with them forever. The events surrounding Emma's injury and Anna's abduction sent shockwaves through the entire Scorpio family. Robin, Anna's daughter and Emma's mother, was immediately alerted to the unfolding disaster. Upon hearing that her daughter had been hurt and that Anna was being hunted by Brennan and WSB, Robin knew she had no choice but to return to Port Charles. The years of trying to lead a normal life had come to an end. Robin, the woman who had already faced countless battles, prepared herself for the most dangerous confrontation of her life. She wasn't just coming back to protect her family, she was coming back to exact revenge on Brennan and anyone who had conspired to harm them. The stakes were higher than ever before, and Robin was ready to burn everything down to save her mother and daughter. As Robin returned, the tension in Port Charles reached new heights. She was not only facing off against Brennan but also against the powerful WSB organization that had once been her ally. The lines between good and evil had blurred, and now, Robin had to decide how far she was willing to go to stop them. The Scorpio family had been tested time and time again, but now, it seemed as though they would face their greatest challenge yet. With everything on the line, Anna, Robin, and Emma were forced to confront the darkest corners of their past and the ruthless enemies who sought to destroy them. The battle for survival had begun. Would they be able to save each other, or would Brennan and WSB bring everything crashing down? Only time would tell. The warehouse, cloaked in darkness, stood as a chilling monument to the nefarious plans Brennan had carefully constructed. It was here, amidst the cold concrete and shadows, that Anna Devane found herself bound, her arms secured tightly behind her with ropes that dug into her skin. She had fought valiantly, but the odds were stacked against her. The suddenness of Brennan's attack left her no chance to escape. Struggling against her restraints, she managed to lift her head slightly, just enough to see Brennan standing over her, cold and ruthless, a sinister smile twisting his features. His eyes gleamed with malevolent satisfaction as he loomed over her, preparing to execute his final, irreversible act. The man who had once been part of her past, a fellow student in their days of training as spies, had now become her greatest adversary. But for Brennan, this wasn't just about silencing Anna. It was about erasing the last threat to his empire, a threat that had been looming over him ever since Anna discovered his dark secrets. Secrets he had fought so hard to keep buried, secrets that, if exposed, would ruin him beyond repair. Despite her bound state, Anna's spirit remained unbroken. Her heart pounded with fierce determination as she willed her body to move. She would not give Brennan the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Anna screamed, struggling against the ropes, her voice echoing through the warehouse. Her body was exhausted from the constant battle, but the fire inside her, burning with the need to protect her family and expose Brennan, kept her going. She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let him erase her, not when so much was at stake. Brennan, seeing her resistance, stepped closer, his face twisted with rage. Without warning, he struck her, the blow sending shockwaves through her body. Anna gasped, the pain shooting through her, but she quickly regained her focus. She needed to survive this, she needed to protect Jocelyn, protect Emma, and make sure Brennan didn't get away with his crimes. She fought harder, but Brennan was relentless. He hit her again, and again, each blow landing with unyielding force. In that moment of chaos, Emma, Anna's granddaughter, entered the scene. She had been following her intuition, sensing that something was wrong, something was amiss with her grandmother's sudden disappearance. When she and Gio arrived at the warehouse, they had no idea what they were walking into. They had no idea that this would be the night that would forever change their lives. The sight of her grandmother, battered and struggling against Brennan's grip, sent a wave of terror crashing through Emma. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her first instinct was to help, to rush in and fight back. She couldn't just stand there while Anna, the woman who had always been her rock, was hurt. But the moment she tried to intervene, one of Brennan's men grabbed her. The force of his attack was overwhelming. Emma barely had time to react before she was thrown to the ground, the impact jarring her body. She tried to crawl towards Anna, tried to help, but the pain in her side was unbearable. Brennan's men weren't about to let her get in their way. As Emma reached out, her vision blurred, the world spinning around her. Blood dripped from her lip where she had been struck, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. Still, she tried to push herself up, desperate to save Anna, desperate to make sure her grandmother didn't die there in that forsaken warehouse. But Gio, who had been trying to protect Emma from Brennan's men, rushed to her side. He saw the depth of her injuries and realized they had little time to act. Gio and Anna worked together, struggling to get Emma to her feet. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on them. Every second counted. With Anna's strength and Joe's support, they managed to drag Emma toward the exit, but Brennan was relentless. He had no intention of letting them leave so easily. His men closed in, cutting off every escape route. Anna, despite her own wounds, refused to let Emma fall into Brennan's hands. She knew that if she didn't get Emma out now, they wouldn't stand a chance. With one last burst of energy, Anna pushed Gio toward the exit, ordering him to get Emma out, but the toll of the fight was too much for Emma. She collapsed, unable to continue, her body giving way to the pain. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she lay in Joe's arms, helpless. Anna, seeing Emma's condition, knew she couldn't leave her behind. The situation quickly turned from bad to worse. The warehouse doors slammed shut with a deafening noise, trapping them inside. Brennan's men surrounded them, and Anna knew they were at a breaking point. She and Gio fought valiantly to protect Emma, but their efforts were growing weaker by the second. Just as it seemed like all hope was lost, Anna's mind raced. She realized they had to leave, and they had to do it now, or they would all die there. With a final, desperate push, Anna and Gio helped Emma escape the warehouse, but not without leaving behind more than just physical injuries. As they made their way into the night, Anna knew they had narrowly escaped death. But she also knew that this was far from over. They couldn't hide forever. Brennan would be after them, and WSB would stop at nothing to silence them. Back in Port Charles, Robin, Anna's daughter and Emma's mother, received the devastating news. Her heart sank as she learned of Emma's injuries and Anna's abduction. It wasn't just the threat to her family that tore at her heart, it was the knowledge that she had been unable to protect them when they needed her the most. Robin, though devastated, had never been one to back down. She had already endured so much pain in her life, but now, the stakes had changed. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a fight for justice. Robin made the decision to return to Port Charles, not only to save her family but to take down Brennan and WSB once and for all. She had spent years trying to live a normal life, but now the truth was clear, she had no choice but to face the demons of her past head-on. She couldn't allow Brennan and WSB to tear apart her family. This time, Robin was prepared to do whatever it took to protect Anna, to protect Emma, and to ensure that Brennan and his cronies paid for the pain they had caused. Robin's return to Port Charles was not a moment of reconciliation but of retribution. She was ready to burn everything to the ground if that's what it took to save her family. No one, least of all Brennan, could stop her now. The battle was far from over. With Robin's return to Port Charles, the Scorpio family was thrust into an all-out battle, not just for survival, but for their very identities. Robin's unexpected arrival turned what had been a desperate fight against Brennan and WSB into a war that stretched far beyond what anyone could have imagined. For years, Robin had tried to lead a quiet life, distancing herself from the world of espionage and danger that had defined her family's existence. But now, the stakes were too high, and there was no more running from the shadows of their past. Robin, Anna, and Emma were no longer merely victims of circumstance. They had become the targets of a powerful and corrupt system, WSB. A system that Robin had once believed in. A system that had once promised protection, but now, had become the greatest threat to their lives. The very organization that had trained Robin and Anna, that had given them purpose, had now turned against them. It was no longer about fighting rogue agents or external threats. It was about fighting a machine that had spent years feeding them lies, manipulating them, and using them as pawns in a larger, more dangerous game. And that machine was now working overtime to erase them from the picture entirely. As Robin's mind raced to understand the enormity of the situation, she couldn't help but reflect on how everything had led to this moment. Anna had always been a beacon of strength and resilience, a woman who had faced countless dangers in her career as a spy. But the revelation that Brennan, a man from Anna's past, had grown into a ruthless villain bent on destroying everything they held dear, was a gut-wrenching blow. It was even worse that WSB, the very agency that had trained Anna, had somehow become complicit in this dark agenda. Robin, who had spent years trying to distance herself from the horrors of her family's history, now found herself pulled back into a fight that she could no longer avoid. For Anna, the return of Robin was both a blessing and a curse. While she was thrilled to have her daughter back, she knew that Robin's involvement in the fight would expose them all to even greater dangers. Robin's return was not just about saving Emma and herself, this was about exposing a system that had long been broken, a system that had turned friends into enemies, and had betrayed those who had once believed in its values. As the Scorpio family came together to face Brennan, Anna, Robin, and Emma began to realize the complexity of the battle before them. They were no longer just up against Brennan and his twisted ambitions. They were fighting an entire organization that had its roots buried deep within the very fabric of global espionage. WSB was powerful, manipulative, and, as they would soon discover, far more corrupt than any of them had imagined. The stakes grew higher with each passing day, as the family learned of the full extent of WSB's reach. It wasn't just Brennan they had to worry about anymore, it was the entire network that supported him. Anna knew that if they were going to bring WSB down, they needed to strike at the heart of the organization. But doing so meant going up against people she once considered allies, agents she had worked with, people she had trusted. The lines between friend and foe had blurred beyond recognition, and Anna had to make an impossible choice: expose the people she had once called colleagues, or risk letting WSB destroy everything she loved. For Robin, the emotional toll of this revelation was overwhelming. She had already faced the emotional devastation of losing her family once, and the idea of fighting against those who had once been her mentors and colleagues felt like a betrayal. She had spent so much of her life trying to heal from the scars left by her family's dangerous past, only to find herself thrust back into the chaos that had defined so much of her youth. But this time, it was different. Robin had grown. She had the knowledge, the experience, and the unwavering determination to protect her family, no matter what the cost. The family's relationship was tested not only by external forces but also by long-buried secrets that had remained hidden for years. Anna and Robin's bond, already complicated by their shared history, was further strained as they confronted the ugly truths about WSB's involvement in their lives. The organization had been the catalyst for much of the pain and suffering in their past, but now, it was the key to their future. The family had to come together, face their past head-on, and find a way to outsmart an enemy that was always one step ahead. As the family navigated this treacherous terrain, they realized that they could not do it alone. The fight for their survival was no longer just about taking down Brennan. It was about dismantling WSB, exposing the organization for the corrupt, dangerous force it had become, and ensuring that no one, could ever use their family again. It was a fight that would require all of their strength, all of their courage, and all of their love for one another. But the journey to bring down WSB was not going to be easy. Every move they made was being watched. Every conversation was being overheard. The enemies they were up against had all the resources at their disposal, and the family was constantly forced to stay one step ahead. Each victory, no matter how small, was hard-earned and came with a heavy price. And with every new revelation, the family found themselves deeper in the web that WSB had created. As Robin, Anna, and Emma began to realize, there were no easy answers. They had no choice but to expose the truths that had been buried for years, no choice but to confront the people who had once been their allies, and no choice but to fight for their family's future in a world that had turned its back on them. With each passing day, the tension mounted, the stakes grew higher, and the battles grew fiercer. The Scorpio family was no longer just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for justice, for freedom, and for a future free from the shadows of their past. It was a war that would consume them, but they were ready to fight it, together. As they prepared for the final showdown, the family knew that everything they had worked for, everything they had fought for, was hanging in the balance. There could be no turning back. The battle for their future was about to begin, and they would stop at nothing to win. This time, they would not let WSB or Brennan win. Together, they would destroy the corrupt system that had haunted them for so long, and finally, they would emerge victorious. But in the end, the question remained, would they be able to survive the battle to save themselves, or would they lose everything in the process? Only time would tell.